when we think of things as a energetic principle and we think of everything as energy, then what I tell my clients to make it real simple is think of anything that helps your nervous system to feel soothed, like real comfortable, and
Yeah.
every time we're in that love state, we feel so comfortable with life. Dr. Bruce Lipton talked about that again. He talked about the honeymoon state, where people, when they're in a honeymoon, they're always in love with each other. But then after the honeymoon phase wears off, then they start having their programming come up, and then they start like lashing out at each other. And then they're like, well, I haven't seen this side of you before. Why are you acting this way? And it's because they're not able to handle the stress that's been accumulating. And see, that's what I want people to understand too, is that we have to stay on top of these things in our lives and not let them build up too bad. And see, we have to help people learn how to do preventative health care better.
Yeah.
Because so many of us, we don't understand, and we wait till the last minute when something's broken. And if we can, and I give the analogy of working on our cars and our vehicles, if we do the proper maintenance, they'll last us so much longer than if we wait till something breaks. Well, it's the same thing on our bodies. If we can, be aware of these different things that are accumulating, then we can keep it from building up so bad. I tell my clients we have two imaginary tanks that we always want to keep filled and maintained, or just be aware of the levels. We have a stress tank. We want to keep that really low. And because anytime we have any new thing that comes into our life that's overwhelmingly stressful, it will sometimes overfill that tank, and it will flow out to our whole lives, and it'll affect us and others in the world. And it can make us feel very overwhelmed and start to make us feel irritable. And that will raise our cortisol levels because it'll stress out our adrenal glands and all kind of things. And then we have to keep our love tank really high, because then the more we have the love tank high, then we can counteract the negative effects of stress and anxiety. But a lot of the love tank is not just getting love from others. It's the love you create inside of yourself, because it's so ironic that people don't understand that so much of what they desire and they want, they're reaching for it in external sources when it all is within. That's why it's so important for us to have a very good relationship with ourselves, and to remind ourselves every day that we love who we are. We love what we're doing. We're proud of ourselves. And if you don't feel that way about yourself, then you need to have a good moment to have forgiveness towards yourself for anything that you've done. And that's a big one that's hard for people sometimes, is they think that if I forgive myself or if I forgive others, then I'm saying what they did is okay, when it's not about that. It's about letting go of the energy again and just moving forward and using the past as the great teacher, and not letting it be a burden or a chain or keep you enslaved to that negative energy again, because I had work with so many clients and so many people, and a lot of times they have constipation and they're holding on to those old emotions and feelings. And then it makes it hard for them to let go of their waste of their body too. And so that's another reason why sometimes people have those problems with their detox journey, is because they're not addressing the thing they need to work on the most. But let's talk about for a second, why would they not be addressing it? Is because it's been so traumatic to them in their lives that they're always running away from it, and it hurts, and they don't have enough love to be able to be brave enough to go through it. And so if you can help them to break down that barrier of resisting and always wanting to run away from it, and just to embrace it, no matter how hard and challenging it is, then they can start to let it transform them. But sometimes people are just scared. They have too much fear. And see, all fear comes from the fear of death and the fear of not having a fulfilled life. So if people can first just say, well, I have to just let go. I have to just trust in the higher power or source, whatever you want to call him, that everything's going to work out for my betterment. And you just have to let go of all fear, even the fear of death. Like I explain to my clients, just try to live in the now, and just try to focus on one day at a time, and try to live in so much gratitude for what we have today, that it doesn't really matter if we get to see tomorrow or not. If we do, it's a wonderful blessing, it's a wonderful gift. And so that's kind of what's helped me a lot, to not really, get too hung up on what's going to happen in the future. I mean, it is okay to have goals, but don't get hung up on those and how they have to turn out a certain way, or you're not going to be happy. Because I have so many of my clients, and I imagine you hear this too, that say, well, Thad, how long is this going to take? And I'm like, well, I can't, number one, I can't predict the future. And number two, a lot of times only our bodies know that answer. And yes, we have more than one body. We have a physical body, we have an emotional body, a spiritual body, a conscious body, Christ conscious body. We have an emotional body, a mental body. We have an ego body, all these different bodies, and so that gives us great complexity. And as Dr. Moore says, we have to have all of those in a synchronistic, balanced way to be able to have true healing, And so many times the society wants us to think that we're only this physical body, and that's so not true. And so then it makes it where it's hard for people to understand the root of their issue. So I ask everyone to just stop and have more awareness. Like, think of real deeply, what is your greatest wounding pattern, or your greatest thing that's wounded you? And what is your greatest challenge? And whatever that is, you have to work on that first, no matter if you have all these other health problems. Because as you mentioned before, so many of the great diseases, especially cancer and those things, it usually takes about 10 years for people to develop cancer to get to the critical stage. So they've had lots of trauma and lots of stress, because if you look at a lot of those people's journey, they've had something that traumatically happened to them in their life that was one of the contributing factors of the reason why they developed that in the first place. And a lot of times it's because the body was under such pressure, stressful wise, and just fear and depression and all those things, that it causes lots of problems. I've even seen it make people's hair go gray just in a short period of time.
Yeah.
Just from such stress, Yeah.
I had that. I had gray hair and it changed back to brown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like, gray hair is just damaged hair from acids,
Yeah.
because
Lymph.
and lymph and acids, Yeah.
Yeah. So now if someone's just getting started and they want to start diving deeper into this emotional world, right? Because in especially women, I think might be a little bit more inclined to dive into emotions, but men sometimes they're just like, ooh, no, that's not for me, men don't cry and that sort of thing. So if someone's just getting started and they know that this is part of the package, you have to deal with those things if you want to get well and start feeling better. So what could someone do, like little things or baby steps, just to get started, to start connecting again?
Well, the first thing is that we have to remember we all have the young child psyche that lives within inside of us all.
Yeah.
And when you can talk to that young child psyche, you break down the barrier of the ego. And that goes through the men's ego or the woman's ego. And it doesn't really matter, because the ego is something that we've let become overpowered sometimes in controlling us, regardless of what, species we are, male or female. But you are right, though. Females have more of the alkaline nature, because the alkalinity is female chemistry and acid is male chemistry. And so men have a tendency to be too bullheaded and too stubborn-headed sometimes, and not able to just admit that they need help and admit that they need to embrace these more challenging concepts sometimes. And women are more easier and able to do that because they understand more of the principles of just taking care of themselves. That's why the majority of the people that are in our health communities, and even before I even got into all these health communities, working on part of my mom's health food store, the majority of our customers, even still to this day, are always women, because you guys are so much more health conscious and just so much more aware of these important things we need to take care of in our lives. And men sometimes get too hung up on just being the job provider or the money provider for the family, and they don't take care of their health, and they think, well, that's my sacrifice for my family. When you can be a better husband, you can be a better father if you take care of yourself too. Just like I have to remind women that too, about taking care of their children, is that they have to love and take care of themselves enough, because you can't give out what you don't have. If you don't have enough love for yourself, how can you expect to share that with your family and your loved ones? And it's very ironic about females that way. You guys are so awesome about giving out your love to the world, but sometimes you don't hold enough love back for yourself. But so to answer your question fully, is we just have to first realize that we have to talk to ourselves in a very compassionate and kind and loving way, because then that helps us to not be defensive and not be reactive to when we try to do something that we don't feel comfortable doing. You know, we can say, well, like you can always tell when you break down those barriers, because the people always respond like a young kid that's like, okay, daddy, or okay, mom, I understand. I don't want to do it, but I'll do it. You know, and they have to act that way towards their self. And what that is, that's dissolving the ego. And that
Yeah.
makes them be humble and understand that, hey, this is going to be very challenging, but if my health is really that important to me, then I'm going to have to just slowly start to work on it. And that's what I do every time when I talk with my clients, when I know it's going to be hard for them to hear what I have to tell them, but I tell it to them in a very soft and kind way. And I'm very aware of my words that I use, and I'm very aware of the tone that I use, because people don't understand so much that we're auditory responsive. And if we say things to someone in a way that is pushing their buttons with the wrong kind of tone, then they're very negative responding to it. But if you
Yeah,
say
they
it in a
just shut
very,
down.
that's right. But
Yeah.
if you say it in a very loving and kind way, it dissolves that so easily for them. And it makes them where they're just like, and that even if they don't want to admit it, they know that you're right, you know. and
Yeah.
and they have to, they first though have to do that for themselves, because you know, we all have to remember we're all on our individual journeys, and we can't do it for you. We're here to just provide the information and the message that can help you to have the tools you need to change your life. You know, because you know, sometimes people are like, well, I just want you to hold my hand and just guide me through it all and always be there to tell me what to do. And I'm like, well, I will help you do that at first, but I want to encourage you to learn how to do it for yourself. Because the more we have that inspiration, that motivation, that drive to want to keep searching for the answers, we can be there every day as things arise. You know, see us coaches and people on the outside of their life, we can't be there every second for you. We can't be there for you every day, because you know, there'll always be things that come up every day that people have to address. And so we have to learn how to have the drive and the willpower every day to say, well, I'm going to keep going with this journey and see where it takes me, and just keep letting it unfold, because we can't think of it as a short-term thing. Sometimes people get hung up on thinking, oh, I'm just going to do this for a little while, then I'll go back to my normal routine and my normal life. And then all the problems come back when they do that, because they're not understanding that to have true health and the quality of health that we all desire, you have to make it your lifestyle. You have to turn it into your life, and you have to embrace it fully and just live it, you know. And so it's all about correcting the mindset, just having these things brought to our attention so that we can have the awareness, have the light bulb go off,
Yeah.
help the people to say, oh, I get it now. Before I didn't really realize that I have people all the time when I have to go through that process, they're like, man, Thad, I never thought about that being so important. And when I hear them say those words, I'm like, they're getting it. You know, they're having
Yeah.
the light bulb go off. And that awareness helps them to realize what they really need to work on and they really need to do. Because I have a lot of people that reach out to me that they're stuck. They've been working on it themselves and
Hmm.
they've gotten so far, but then they need someone to help them to do the fine tuning they need to figure out what they can do to make the further progress, you know.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice for anyone that's getting started, is just take a self-assessment. That's why it's very important to find someone that has a good health questionnaire for you to fill out, and just help you to see where you're sitting at and what's going on. Because my health questionnaire, I took Dr. Morris's health questionnaire, but then I added on life questions that I got from Hilda Larson, you know, that was a big fan of Dr. Morris's. And I combined several different health questionnaires together and made up mine. And it really helps to ask people all these specific questions that really shows where they're at spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And it
Hmm.
shows the symptoms that they're having and what's going on. And then when you correlate that with the eyes, because the eyes help read, you know, what's going on genetically, lymphatically, and the nervous system. Those are the three main things the eyes really tell us that's very important. And then you can see how certain symptoms or certain stressful factors are irritating those genetic weaknesses. And then you can start to work on things that will help the genetics to kind of recover from being under so much stress. And then when the genetics start to recover, the body starts to respond positively. But people don't understand, as Bruce Lipton says, that so much of your genetics are relying on your positive mindset or your correct mindset. Because did you know he said that 30% of all pharmaceutical medication is a
Placebo.
placebo? And he
Mm.
said, why does the placebo work so well? It's because your mind, because you believe it. So that should show people that don't realize how powerful their mindset is, that we have to be very cautious in what we say because I have clients all the time that they'll over apologize to me about certain things. They're like, oh, well, Dad, I'm sorry, I'm having asked so many questions. I'm like, quit doing that, because you're making yourself feel bad for just
Yeah.
asking for help. When don't apologize like that too much, because it makes you feel like you're doing something wrong. When don't, because we have a tendency to do that sometimes to ourselves, make ourselves feel like we're always doing something bad or something wrong. And what does that do? That makes your subconscious mind always think you're not doing what you need to be doing, or you're doing something wrong. So it's just about having more awareness and more understanding, and just
Yeah.
searching for the answers. Yeah.
I love what you said about the questionnaire, just not looking into what's happening physically, but also in the other aspects. And one thing that has really worked well for me, and also for my clients, is journaling. And
Yes.
that really helps with the self-awareness, because
Yes.
sometimes we can deceive ourselves. We can have a feeling that something's going wrong, but not really, and we just put it aside. But then when we actually start writing what we're feeling, and then what we're thinking, sometimes the thoughts that we have can be so horrible, and that
That's
little
right.
voice that talks us down. And then until we actually start listening to that little voice and we start writing it down, we don't realize how bad it is, or or when we actually start seeing changes, when we start being kinder to ourselves, more loving. So if you do that, and I always tell people, do it at least for a week and you'll see. Because some people are like, journaling, really? What, I'm not a
Mhm.
kid, or and then they see the value once you start seeing the patterns, and you're like, oh, wait a moment, why am I feeling like this about this particular subject? And then you're like,
Yeah.
wait, I have some um, hate in my heart towards a situation that I thought I had healed. Because that happens
Right.
sometimes. We go over layers and layers and layers, and we're like, oh yeah, that's something that I've already dealt with in therapy, and then it comes back. That
That's right.
that's a deeper layer.
That's the
um,
programming. Yeah.
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 So when you start journaling, you'll see those patterns, and that helps with your growth, self-development, self-awareness. And you realize there will be things that you don't want anymore.
Hmm.
And when you're reprogramming your mind, you have to understand there are things that you will want to get rid of once you bring them out to a conscious level. And then you'll have to replace those with new beliefs. And what
That's
are
right.
those new beliefs? Those are beliefs that are aligned with love, and with
That's right.
compassion, and with respect for yourself.
That's
And
right.
one of the things that you kept saying, and I think that's the one thing, that if you had to do one thing, that's self-love. And how do you get to
That's
that
right.
stage? How do you get to that stage of self-love? When you start choosing things for your own well-being. And
Hmm.
when I got started, and I got to a point where I was very strict, and I was like very harsh on myself, and that wasn't very loving, but I was doing it for my own good, right? So sometimes it can be a little tricky. And the one question that has worked for me, and I also tell this to my clients, is this coming from a place of love?
That's
Are
right.
you doing this out of love? And if the
Hmm.
answer is no, then there you go. Something has
Yeah.
to change.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. I also use with my clients the journaling technique, because it is so powerful, because
Yeah.
we all have to realize we're on different levels of awakening, like we're awakening in different levels throughout our journey. And it's an ever changing, evolving process. And we have to understand that sometimes we need these techniques that we can have to help us to really be able to see what's going on. Because sometimes I'll ask my clients, I want you to start to notice what your thought patterns are on a daily basis. And I want you to write down in your journal, not only your keep up with what you're eating, because sometimes that's very important in your journal too, because it can help us to see when we have poor food combinations. And because sometimes
Mm-hmm.
something you ate a day or two ago, as it's going through your digestive system, it doesn't cause you digestive trouble until it gets down to your lower intestines, or through your system. And so that's why it's good to also journal about what we eat sometimes too. But the thing with the thoughts and the emotions in the journal is that sometimes I ask my clients, notice what you're thinking. Every time you have positive thoughts, make a mark, a little tally, and then every time you have negative thoughts, make a tally. And look back at the end of the day, how many positive thoughts were you thinking? How many negative thoughts were you thinking? And if you had more negative thoughts that day, then you need to say, I need to work on that, and that I need to try to work on that better tomorrow. And then plus people don't realize when they write down those things, they write down some of the thoughts they're having, they can look back on it a few days later and they can say, wow, look what I was going through that day. And it can help remind them. Because my girlfriend, she's done that naturally because that's part of her character and who she always was, is that she loves to journal, but she always journals when she has lots on her mind. It's kind of like she talks to the journal like our therapist in a way, and so it's just good to see our thoughts and how they are, because and it goes back to that, how would we talk to a child? We need to remember that, because a lot of the things that people say to themselves, it's so harsh and so negative that I'm like, would you say that to a young child? Would you say that to your own daughter, your son? And a lot of them are like, no. I say, well, you're saying that to your young self, because your young child is your number one child that you have to take care of always. And you wouldn't want to be mean to your young child. You wouldn't want to be ungrateful or unmotivating or unappreciative or not or unmotivating, and uninspiring. So we have to be very aware of that, because sometimes people are very harsh on themselves. I mean, I've had some of my clients repeat back to me some of the things that they say to themselves, and I'm like, wow, why would you ever say that to yourself? That's so bad, And they're like, well, Thad, I just didn't feel like I was worthy. I didn't have any self-confidence. I just didn't feel like I was deserving of love. And it's so sad how people get into that state, because I just hate to see people go through such hardships and just such sadness, because they don't deserve it. They deserve to be free and to be a spirit that enjoys this experience we're having here on this planet while we're here, and I just wish I could set people free sometimes and help them to see what I see, because sometimes I can see through their illusion that they're setting before their eyes, and I can see their true self. And I'm like, I just wish you could see what I see. I see a beautiful soul that's just aching to have a good experience in this world. And you just, even though you've had some hardships so far in your life, that's not defining who you are. That's just the experiences you've had so far. And you need to realize that you have, every day you have a new opportunity to make a fresh start and make a fresh new. And you don't have to feel like those old burdens of your past are still chained to your ankles. You can let those go. And what you said was very powerful, Lou, about every time you release an emotion or a feeling that was trapped there, or that you've been carrying for a long time, you have to replace it with something positive, like a positive affirmation or a positive new way of living, or you will have a new negative emotion or feeling replace that old one, because you have that void there. And so you want, as you were detoxing, we remember not only do we have physical detox trash coming out, but we also have old emotions and feelings coming out. Because in just a minute, we'll talk about emotional eating. But did you know, every time we have emotional eating, because I was listening, or I was reading a book from Dr. Jensen, and he said stress has no place at the dinner table. If you are arguing with your loved ones or someone, every bite that you take, you're swallowing those emotions when you're eating the food, and then it gets trapped down in our body and our different organs and glands and stuff, and that affects us energetically again. And in the Chinese say each one of your glands and organs has a different emotional center. Like you have anger and frustration, irritability from your gallbladder and your liver. And that's the reason why women have anger symptoms when they have PMS in their cycle, is because their liver is kind of detoxing. And that's one reason why we feel kind of those feelings too when we detox the liver, and each one of the different organs and areas have those components. I'll give you guys, all the listeners, an example right quick, and then we'll go on to some other questions.
Sorry.
Okay.
That I was thinking maybe we can share some links as well after, when we upload the video with the books that we discussed, where they share their information.
Yeah, that will be a good idea too, so they'll know where to get this stuff from.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was giving an iridology reading one time to a person, and I said, you have a strong upper lung weakness. And he told me, he listened to my whole presentation, because I was giving a live reading in my parents' health food store. And he said, well, Thad, I don't understand why that would be. I've never been a smoker. I've never been around people smoking. I've never had been a big dairy drinker, so I've never had lots of bronchitis and stuff. So he said, I'm kind of confused and puzzled about that one. I said, well, you do know that there's always a possibility that you could have some strong emotional traumas to the lungs. I said, do you know what the lungs and the large intestines, you know what the emotions, it's depression and anxiety and stress. And he said, when I said that, his eyes got big. He said, oh,
Mm.
Thad, that makes complete sense. He said, a couple years ago, I lost my son. He committed suicide over a girl. And he said, it broke me down so hard that I lost the will to live. I said, well, you know what happened when that happened is that you quit breathing properly. Your lungs shut down. Because when we have extreme anxiety and stress, we breathe too shallow.
Yeah.
We stop breathing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Or we hyperventilate. It's the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. And it's because it's tied in with the nervous system, and so that's why I remind people that deep breathing exercises are so vitally important for not only many other functions in our body, but also for our emotions and our feelings, because man, it's one of the best stress reducers you can have is just to sit very calmly and just breathe deeper, breathe from, as Dr. Morrison, a lot of people have brought to our attention, breathe from the belly
Mm-hmm.
breathing, the diaphragm breathing. That's very important, and so they all of these things tie in together because when we talk about the healing journey, we're talking about it from a holistic approach. We're not
Yep.
just focused on the physical, we're focused on the emotional, mental, spiritual, all of those, and it's a whole big package. So that's why they're all tied in together. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so many things, but
Yeah.
one of the things that you discussed is the emotional eating, right? And sometimes, well, sometimes not. When we crave for something, or it could be something very specific. It's like you can imagine it and you can picture it and you can savor it, and you're like, oh, I'm. That's not real physical hunger. That's either your parasites trying to ask you for food, or that's an emotion that you had previously, if you got upset, or if you were sad, and you're looking for comfort. And that's a way that
That's
we
right.
comfort ourselves, like, oh, this is going to make me feel better. Because yes, when you eat something delicious, it triggers dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin in your brain, and then you have that feeling of, oh, I feel good, this is good for me. But then what happens when you're eating something, that's a short thing, right? So you satisfy that, and then you're feeling that void for that moment, but then that thing that you were trying to cover up will come back, so the void's still there. And then eventually, in the medium and long run, that affects your health as well. So
That's right.
imagine how that works inside your brain, that you're
Mhm.
doing something that you think that it's good for you. And some people even do it as a reward, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
I have these that is not that good for me, but I'll use it as a reward. And then you're doing something that is not good for your body, that it's eventually hurting yourself. So sometimes when you put it into perspective and you look at it, you're like, oh, wow, I'm doing this. But then it becomes a pattern, right? And then we get into the subjects of addictions, like food addiction, or bulimia, anorexia, and alcoholism. And then some people, when they get into this lifestyle and they get rid of the food thing, but they don't deal with the emotions, what happens is that gets transferred. That doesn't go
That's right.
away until you deal with it. It just goes into people becoming sex addicts, or
That's right.
they start smoking weed, or they shopaholics. So
That's right.
you name it, and we all have some type of addiction at different levels. So
That's right.
that's the reality that we live in. But what I'm getting at is, deal with those emotions, deal with those situations that when you're about to run for food and you're like, I just need this, just stop for a moment, pause, sit down, close your eyes, and just leave that emotion, and feel it, and think, okay, what's going on here? And then information will start coming down. And I've done that so many times, and I just break down crying, and I
Yeah.
realize this has been happening,
Yeah.
and I realized that I've been trying to push that away, and then it kept coming back until I dealt with it. So that's so precious when you're able to do that. And it does take courage and it's uncomfortable and
Yes.
you're going to want to run away from it. But
That's
then when
right.
you deal with it, it's such a peaceful feeling, like, oh,
Hmm.
okay, I get it now. It's okay,
Yeah, that's right.
So in this aspect of emotional eating, is there something that you would recommend?
Well, yes, there is. And how I help explain it to people in a way they can understand it is that we all have ways of coping with things. We all have coping mechanisms. And
Mm-hmm.
what happens is we learned a lot of times improperly how to cope with life's challenges emotionally improperly from our parents because we see how they coped with issues that they go through when we're growing up with them.
Mm,
And a lot of times people, they run away from their issues because they don't know how to properly process them and handle them because they were never taught how to do it properly. And a lot of times the reason why we reach for these stimulating and suppressive choices that we make in the world for our emotions and feelings is because we're not being spiritually fulfilled. We're not learning how to allow our spirit to have deep, satisfying experiences. Because if you really do that and you really fill up that tank of your body so much, then you won't need to suppress or to stimulate yourself away. And see, if you look at so many of the things people do in the world, even things that they think are not harmful, it's still a way of escape, like movies, television programs,
yeah.
TV shows. It's all a form of escape, and it's because they can watch that movie and they get so sucked in, they imagine they're living out that character's life, and then when they leave the movie, they're like, oh, I got to go back to my life, and they keep running after that way of escaping and suppressing. And that's the same way it is with the food. Like, look at the keto and the paleo.
Oh God.
They are the kings of diets that suppress our symptoms. And
Yeah.
see, when you keep pushing it away, yes, it will give you the illusion that it's helping, but that's only because it's pushing away all of your issues that you have. And it's not really getting to the deep core root of the problem. And that's the way our society has developed, that is so negative. Like when you have a headache, people will say, well, what can I take for the headache? Well, I say, go beyond that. What is the root cause of the headache? And then if you find out what the root cause is, you'll stop having the headaches. But so many of our society, we're based on treat it, treat it, treat it. And same thing with our emotions. We're like, just treat it instead of get to the root issue. And a lot of times people, they're having a craving for something to help them to feel better, but they don't realize that the food, when they eat it, it doesn't really help them to feel better because they're not addressing the main core issue. And what makes it so challenging is that when people start to work on things that reveal those weaknesses, those emotions, those feelings that they've been running away from so much, they start to get even more anxiety and stress because it's bringing up the things that they're really not ready to deal with, because that's why I have so many people, it's so hard for them to eat fruit very much or even all the way, because it's bringing up too much stuff too quickly, because fruit
Yeah.
is the great revealer. And then they'll blame the fruit for being the cause of it all when it's not the fruit's cause. The fruit is actually helping you. It's bringing it up, your old trash and garbage that you've been running away from. And that's what makes it so challenging for people. And because there's been many times when I've been on real strict and fruit cleanses and fasting and detoxing, and I would just crave some avocado, just simply avocado in a salad. And I would give in and eat that, and I still didn't feel completely satisfied. And then I had a eye awakening a moment one time when I was like, wow, I actually would have felt better if I had just resisted the salad and the avocado, because I kind of felt sluggish and not as light and as feeling good that I was from the fruit before when I ate the salad and gave in and ate the avocado with the salad. And then I realized I would have felt better if I had just kept eating the fruit and just went and meditated, and meditated and went by the beach or the river or somewhere where I could get in nature and just process my feelings that were building up too much at that moment. Because sometimes when we don't do enough self-care on our spiritual and our emotional and our stress levels and all that, we don't do enough of that, it will build up to the point where we'll crave something to stimulate us away. And the more things you take away, when you start to give up more of these stimulating things like drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, cannabis, all of those things, including your food, then it makes us way more sensitive to our feelings, because you start to feel way more sensitive to the world's energy too, as well as your own energy. Like you can cry much easier, you can have happiness much easier, you can have all these things. And see, I think our human nature, we were supposed to be real sensitive like that, and we were
Yeah.
supposed to have a real heightened awareness and have a real good interaction with the world's energy too, like the sun, the moon, the stars, the ocean waves. All of those are good electromagnetic frequencies. But then when we're around too much of the man-made electromagnetic frequencies, that really affects us too negatively emotionally, because that's affecting your amygdala, your emotional center of your brain, which is affecting your master glands. Your hypothalamus and your amygdala are very sensitive to the man-made frequencies. That's why even the cell phones, holding the cell
Yeah.
phone too much to our face, and even wearing these too much, that's radiation going in, our ears and stuff, especially the wireless ones. The wireless ones are some of the worst ones, because they communicate with each earbud, and that's sending radiation through the middle of your head. And
Ooh.
that's where the amygdala and the emotional area is in the center of our head. So that's another thing that people have to understand about how all of it's tied in together. So it
Yeah.
goes back to your environment, and it goes
Mhm.
back to your lifestyle and your state of mind and your thoughts. And so what I would recommend someone to do is, as they're working on cleaning up their body and their emotions, is you need to sit down and talk with yourself a lot. You need to be much more open with yourself, and just think about the things you're thinking about, and just be very comfortable with it, and don't let your anxiety and your irritability make you react too quickly. Like we'll have a tendency to get so frustrated that we're like, I don't care if it's not something I need to do, I'm just going to do it anyways. When if we can just calm down and just be observant, and just I try to give the analogy with people that, imagine your soul and your spirit is the great observer. It's not there to really make decisions on what you should do. It's just watching, it's just observing. And then your body and your mind is the one that's making the choices, but your soul and your spirit is just watching. But when
Yeah.
it's sitting there watching, it can watch what the mind thinks about. It can watch what the mind is deciding to do with your life. And then when your spirit and soul is watching, it can make sure your mind is not doing something that you don't want it to do. But if you let the mind completely take the reins, and your spirit isn't really having much of a decision, or much of a say so, or not observing, then it can have a tendency to lead you in paths that you'll think before you really feel. And so you should always feel before you think, because when you feel from your heart and the feelings that's deep inside your soul, you're not living on cravings. You're listening to your spirit, and you're listening to what your spirit really needs. And remember, the spirit isn't really desiring those stimulating things. It wants inner stimulation, which means food can't give you that. Food can't fully fulfill you like something spiritually. I'm talking about like something that's like of nature, or like of inner work, because that's why
Mhm.
we feel even better when we get that interaction with nature. That's why I tell people, you need enough interaction with nature. You need to go out in nature periodically to get not only proper sun and proper breathing, but you need to do meditation and deep breathing there, because you can have that interaction with the core energy of the world, and the in the area of the world that's not influenced negatively from the man-made energies. And see, a lot of times people are too much in the cities. They're not getting out in nature enough. And I'll share a quick story with you about this, and then we'll talk about the next question, the next subject. Is I had a client one day. He called me up and he said, Thad, I'm trying to quit drinking coffee. He said, I know it's bad for me because it's causing me some health problems and some challenges with my detoxing and stuff. But he said, I'm actually noticing something, is that I've been working on it. And he said, I don't have the craving anymore for the caffeine and the stimulation. But he said, I'm noticing now it's affecting my emotions and my feelings. He said, the challenges I'm having now is that I notice that I still miss waking up in the morning and drinking it when I start my day, and when I'm reading the
Mm.
newspaper, and when I'm sitting around with friends at the cafe. And then when he said that, I said, oh, well, now you're getting to the root issue of the reason why a lot of people have challenges with our food substances. Is I said, you're craving the experience. You're craving the feelings behind sitting there and enjoying that cup of coffee, or that moment of spending with your friends. And so you're tying your emotions in with that substance, and every time you think of that substance, you're remembering the feeling that's attached to the substance. And that's how sometimes we can feel a warm feeling towards something that's not good for us. And that's why, because I've even heard people say the same thing about smoking cigarettes, is they're like, well, Dad, when I smoke cigarettes, it makes me remember when my mom was smoking cigarettes and when I was younger and stuff like that. Just we have emotions attached to physical things, and we have to learn how to sometimes let those things go when it's something that's harming our health. And we have to try to find something healthy that we can attach our emotions to, and stuff, but we, at the same time, though, we really don't want to be too attached to anything. We want to learn how to be flexible in life, and not get too attached to anything, even possessions, because that's why sometimes people can have a tendency to be hoarding and have too many possessions, is because they have feelings and emotions attached to those possessions. And the more we clean up our bodies, the more we want to clean up the clutter around our homes, because it really helps us to feel good. And it is good to periodically get rid of old clutter, because you have old emotions attached to those things, and it sets you free. It helps you to not be weighted down so much, because my parents have had a tendency to be too much of hoarders with old stuff they've had for 20, 30 years ago. And my dad, me and my sister have been helping him to clean up a lot of stuff that he's had. And he's been talking a lot about how it's been helping him feel better, because he just sees the progress, and he doesn't feel weighted down as bad from all those possessions and all that clutter. But so we have to just see how all these things play in our lives, and we have to keep being aware more and more, and just keep raising our awareness, keep peeling back the layers, as we say, and just diving deeper, and just being excited for the change. So many people run away from change, and they don't realize that's the one thing that's always going to be constant on this world. And we need to embrace change, because I give my clients several different analogies, and I explain that our challenges are our greatest gift sometimes. And that there's a Chinese saying that says the only difference between the master and the student is the master has failed more times than the student has even tried. And then I give them the analogy of Albert Einstein. Oh, no, not Einstein. I'm sorry. It was Edison, I think it was, the one that created the light bulb in the United States. And he said, I thought at first I failed 200 times to create the light bulb, but I realized it was those 200 times of trying that I was able to successfully create the light bulb. So he realized that it wasn't failures. It was needed to help him to learn how to create it right in the first place. But sometimes in our mindsets, we think, oh, well, I'm failing. Why do I need to keep on going? And see, if he had have stopped at 100, he would have never went through that process that he needed to discover how to create the light bulb. But he didn't let that stop him. He kept going until he had his breakthrough. And see, that's what I'm trying to get people to understand too, is that we can't be impatient. We can't get so stressed that we're like, oh, well, I tried. Because I hear so many people on this detox and these healthy lifestyles are like, oh, well, I tried it for 3 or 4 months and I didn't get nothing out of it. And I'm like, you spent 20, 30 years of your life living unhealthy. How do you expect 2 or 3 months to do anything? That's just barely scratching the surface, And it's just people, they get so hung up in the illusion of time and being impatient. And they're like, well, if I don't see immediate changes, then why do I need to keep going? And they just don't realize that, it's a process we all have to go on, and we have to lose that illusion of time.
Yeah.
And don't worry about it, how long it's going to take. Just be excited for the changes that can come, because you're going to learn and grow. And remember, nothing worth doing is going to be easy. Everything that's going to be challenging is going to be rewarding, because you're not going to get anything for free. You got to work for it,
Yeah. So it's so interesting that, sometimes people, they send me messages and they're like, oh, I'm so happy for you. I know that you've changed so much. You look so healthy now. And they're like, you have such willpower, and you're so disciplined. And I'm like, I wasn't like that. I was one of those people that would just sit on their couch, watch TV, eat, then go to bed, wake up tired, dragged out of bed, shower, coffee, work, and then repeat again. That was my life. And I was feeling miserable. I was depressed. And I didn't get from there to what I do now, just like out of nowhere. I actually had to try, and I failed so many times, and it wasn't perfect. And I got upset, and then I was very hard on myself. And I was like, I'm not going to give up. And then it was more love and more compassion. Get back on the horse and do it again and again and again and again and again and again. So it hasn't been a perfect road. It's never like that. I don't know. Maybe someone did it that way. I didn't. It was just like ups and downs and turns, and then back at it again. And that's the way I learned.
Yeah. Well, that's the way everyone's experience is. Now, whether they reveal all of those things they had to go through or not, everyone has to go through that process, because that's part of the transformational process we have to go through. It's never just a straight upward journey. You know, it's all over the place. You know, you might take 5 steps forward and then slide back a few steps, you know, and then you have to just pick yourself up and go again, you know. And that was my problem in my journey a lot of times, is that I would try to be too strict on myself, you know, and I didn't allow myself to transition easy at first. I tried to be too serious at it at first, because I would get so motivated and so excited. I was like, oh, I'm going for it. And I would go for it too strongly instead of just doing it gradual, just taking it one step at a time and doing like baby steps in a way, because that way it was easier for me to maintain. Because what I would do is I would go real hardcore and then I'd crash and burn. And then I would get so upset at myself for falling off the wagon that I would just give up. And I'd be like, oh, I don't even care right now. Then I'm just going to just do whatever. And then I would start feeling so bad for making that choice that eventually I'd be like, well, no matter how challenging it is, I got to get back on track with it. You know, and so I discovered that it was better for me when I would feel really stressed to try to find something that would ground me. Like, and that's what I still tell my clients today with transitioning, is it try to have goals for yourself, but be real gentle about it. And if you have a stressful moment, or if it's getting too intense, then have some backup foods that you can eat that are not as bad as the real bad foods, but there's something that, you know, like some grounding foods like beets and carrots, and the grounding foods, the foods that help us to ground more, but also get more grounding. You know, just go out in nature, put your feet on the grass, because that helps ground our energies, whether they're all stirred up or not. You know, that we need some grounding with it. And even steaming some vegetables, you know, just I try to help people to first understand, you know, go for something that's mucus free towards our body before you eat something that's mucus causing. And then that way you can first allow yourself to have something that's different than that more strict program you're on, but you're not going for something that's going to be really, really bad. You know, like don't go straight to the horrible junk food. Try to find the middle ground first, you know.
Yeah.
Even if you get the fake meat burger, you know, instead of the actual cheeseburger, that's still better, you know, because there's always good, better, best, you know. And we want to remember that in that approach, you know, because sometimes people get so frustrated and they fall off the wagon, they just completely quit and they go back to something, and then it just makes them where they're going back and forth, when we have to find some kind of middle ground, you know. Because that was my problem. I kept swinging back and forth, but every time I did that, though, I learned better how to do it the next time. So we have to look at it as part of the process sometimes, because we can learn from our challenges. We can learn from how we did it before and it didn't work so well, and how we can do it again and make it work, you know, for us, you know. So it's part of the process. We just have to be patient with ourselves and loving, and remember again that whole principle of how would you help your daughter, your son to do it, you know. And if we keep thinking of it that way, and then think of our young child psyche that way, then it can help us to think outside the box of being so hard on ourselves, because you wouldn't treat your son or your daughter that way. So how would you help them if they were struggling, you know? So when you start thinking of yourself outside of, you know, who you are, then it can help you to not be so bad on yourself, you know. Yeah.
Excellent. And one other subject that has come up lately is on the stress and the anxiety that everyone's living during the quarantines. And I know in the US, some states have already, you know, started lifting the quarantine. In some other countries, not yet. And people are just, you know, they don't know what to do with themselves. They're under a lot of stress, and there's also anxiety or panic attacks, or they can't sleep, and that is really affecting the health as well. It's not just on the emotional side, but that's going to have consequences if we don't look after that. So what would you tell someone, you know, that's going through this situation?
Well, again, it all goes back to the energy. The energy is so important. The frequencies is, we have to remember we have a worldwide collective energy that all of us humans are putting out into the atmosphere of the world, and we can all feel it. That's why we all feel so turbulent right now. We all feel so stirred up. We all feel so much changes, you know, and that's why we can easily feel overwhelmed, because if we have too much stress and anxiety, and our frequencies are already negative, then that added on top, it makes us greatly feel overwhelmed, and then it starts making us have lots of fear. and then we also have our family collective history, because it's passed down from grandfather to father to son, and it's passed down throughout the generations. And until you become more aware of what your parents and your family had to go through, then you can be aware that you could be susceptible to that same energy because you are inherited it from your family. So we have to think of those two concepts, and we have to look at all of the available information, and then we have to realize that be the change we want to see. If we can do something about it and help to move us forward, then we can. But if we can't do something about it, like if it's all those world issues that we wish that they could be different and they didn't have to be the way they are, if we can't do anything about it, then we can't over worry about it. Because sometimes people are so worried about these things that are going on when they don't really have much that they can do about it. So what I tell them to do is just focus on the changes that you can make that will help the world's energy to be more raised up, like raise your vibration, and then that will help the world's vibration to raise. So be the change you want to see, like Gandhi says, and just focus on your world, on your life, on your frequencies, and then try to not let the world's frequencies bother you too much. And that's why I think now more than ever, we need to get away from the cities and we need to get more in nature, because that's what's been helping me to cope with it a lot. Because, we as coaches, we have more weight on our shoulders sometimes because we're trying to help these other people that are really overwhelmed and weighted down with a lot of energy. So we have to learn how to process the energy even more. And as I've been working on this, and I know this probably applies to you too, I've developed more of my intuition and my more intuitiveness. So with what comes more intuition comes more sensitivity, and you can feel the energy frequencies even more. But there's times when I feel greatly overwhelmed with love, like my heart feels like it's going to explode sometimes. But there's also certain times when I feel greatly overwhelmed with sadness, because that's what happens the more we raise our vibration, is that we can feel all frequencies more easily. But we have to just be prepared to how to handle those waves of energy. And see, that's what I'm trying to leave people with today, is just keep practicing, keep studying, keep reading other techniques that other people have done in these turbulent times and how they've handled it. And then just keep experimenting and listen to what your soul tells you when you experiment. Like if you really resonate with a certain technique that you do that helps to reduce stress and helps you to process how you handle the world's things that they're going through, then if your emotional center and your nervous system really responds positively to it, then that's telling you that you need to do more of that. But if you try something and it just seems like it irritates you more and bothers you, then keep searching for another solution. Just keep looking, keep studying, keep reading, keep searching, keep talking to people and reaching out to people. That's why it's good for us to have these communities online and have people we can talk to, because so many times people just need someone to vent to just let someone to hear their thoughts and their emotions and feelings. And then when they hear their self sharing that with others, then they can sometimes say, wow, listen to myself, listen to what I just said to them. And it goes back to sometimes we need to have conversations with ourselves. We need to talk to ourselves like we're our own best friend, and have that relationship with ourselves, and these are things that sometimes people don't think about. And they're like, wow, that's crazy talk. You're over there having a conversation with yourself, but no, I mean, we are multi-dimensional, multi-layered individuals. And so we have to, remember that is a part of how we want to live life, Are you still there, Lou? I think it froze up.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. It was froze up there for a minute.
Yeah, I think there's something wrong with my connection. Anyway, I can hear you. It's fine. So yeah, it's definitely the things that we do to protect our energy, and some people don't realize that there are situations that are going to lower our energy, and there are situations that are going to raise up our energy. And it's not something that you do once and then that's it. It's continuous work, and you have to do it every day. You have to look after your energy and what are the things that raise up our energy levels and that can protect us from lower energies from the environment or the outside world. So don't wake up and watch the news. That's definitely going to bring you down. Instead of doing that, you can do some yoga, you can do some meditation, you can do some positive affirmations, you can do visualizations of how you want to see yourself in the future. Then what are the other things? You can read books that are going to inspire you. You can work on your journal. You can be with loved ones, with people that you feel good around. Because sometimes when we're around certain people, even though they can be our parents or partner, and if we're not feeling good around them, then that can be turned into a toxic relationship.
That's right.
And you have to look after your energies around people as well. You don't want people sucking into your energy and bringing you down. Then your pets, I have a cat, and he's lovely, and whenever I'm with my cat, I just feel peaceful. Then taking a nice hot bath, cleaning my house. When I clean my house, I feel like the whole energy around the house, it's fresh, and I feel comfortable, and it's my safe space for me. Gardening, I love that, and being out in nature. If you have the opportunity, and if you don't live in a city, like I do, I actually am very lucky, and I have my flowers and my plants and everything out there that connects me with my little bit of nature that I have, and even though I live in a city, but I try to, as much as possible, well, not now, but to go outside and reconnect with nature. And I also do some gazing in the very early morning, and I breathe in, and I get that energy through my eyes, and that really helps me throughout the day. And when I don't do it, I can feel the difference. And those are the things that work for me. And obviously, high vibrational foods. The fruits, the veggies. Sometimes you might need some grounding, as you said, and we can eat some roots like carrots or a beet or even a sweet potato or some steamed veggies, and that will calm us down for a little bit, but not doing too much damage. So those are all the things that we can do to look after ourselves, to make sure that we're in a good place. We're not going to be able to change the world, maybe, but we can look after ourselves and our energy, and then we will attract things that are at that level. So there's a frequency thing, right? So if you are vibrating in love and compassion and up here, then it's very rare, I would say impossible, if something were to happen that was lower vibration, that would match up with your level. So those things start fading away. Those things that used to vibrate lower from your life, like the addictions or certain people that weren't good for you, places, situations, and then you start creating a new reality for yourself.
Yeah. Well, hey, Lou, you may have to restart your video. You may have to stop it and then start it back on, because it's still jarbled a little bit, and it's still kind of breaking up. You may have to just turn your video on and turn it off, and it may fix it.
Okay. Let's see. I'll turn it on.
Yeah. Because also your audio, you may have to turn your audio on and off too, because the audio is kind of like little reverbing, but we could still hear you, but it was just kind of a little gargled sounding. Yeah. And the video is lagging real bad. I don't know if it's lagging for me on your side.
Let's see. How do I stop my video?
You see down in the bottom left-hand corner, there's a mute button and a stop video. And you won't infect the recording or anything. You'll just mute it and then just turn the video off and then turn it back on. See, I can do it too. I'll push stop video. See in your name, and then when you push it, it'll go back. Yeah, just bear with us, guys. We're trying to fix it so we can get it back going. Yeah, it's working better now.
Yeah, I think it was my computer that was running a
program. Now I lost you on the audio. You might want to push your mute button again.
Okay, so I'm gonna push the button.
Okay.
Again,
no, it's working. It's working. It's working. Okay, good. Yeah, but no, I could still hear what you were saying. It was just gargled a little bit, but the video was stopped, but it was okay. But yeah, we heard what you said. That's not why I didn't want to interrupt you, because what you were saying was very true and very powerful. Yeah, these are all principles we just encourage you guys to just think about first. Don't expect us to expect from you to just be able to start doing all of these things tomorrow. We're just, again, trying to help give the message to the people that can have some food for thought, just things to think about first. And then once you process it a little bit, then you can start making the right choices on how you want to apply these different principles to your life. Because over time, it just takes practicing. We have to be like a research scientist or a scientist that experiments, because we have to keep try on error, keep experimenting with things that work and things that don't work. And what I encourage people to do is think about everything that goes on in your life. Is it positive and loving, or is it an environment where you're around others that are negative and sour and upset, and they're always complaining and nagging? Because there's so many of my clients I talk to, they're like, Thad, it's so hard for me to just start my health journey and my detox journey because I'm around people that are so sour all the time. Like, I can't get along with my mom. I can't get my husband to even support me on what I'm trying to do. And I'm like, well, to some degree, we have to find our own serenity, or own areas where we can have some peace and some quiet. And sometimes we have to tell people, say, hey, look, if I can't get along with you and you're just all the time going to be negative, then I'm going to have to distance myself from you. I love you and I wish we could get along better, but I can't keep having this acidic relationship, because, and that applies also to the things we watch, the things we listen to, our television programs. You want to ask yourself always, is this helping my health journey, or is this hurting my health journey? And that includes people you're around, places you work, places you go shop, places you visit, people you hang out with, things you watch on television, things you listen to, things you read, because remember, anything that goes in, if it's not helpful to our bodies, we have to help it to come out, because it's polluting. And that means listening to people using bad language, just everything can be junky to ourselves. And we have to be able to see that. And because sometimes people don't realize it because it's so part of the society. Like, there's certain places in the United States where it's very common where they use foul language on the radio, and you can just hear that on the radio. And there's so many television programs and things like that, that we watch. And it's just, that's just not good for our bodies, because it's frequencies of energy. And when it goes in, you have to detox it out. That's why it's very important that you're cautious and aware of what you react to, because, it's the same thing for what we're exposed to in our environments. If you get it on your skin, if you eat it, drink it, or breathe it, it can hurt or help your health. That's why you have to be very careful with, chemicals, like Glade plug-ins and air fresheners and colognes and perfumes, because those are all neurotoxins that affect our brain. But then essential oils are very helpful and healing to our body if you use them in the right way, in the right dosages and things like that. Because of course, they're so potent that they can irritate if you overuse them or use them in the wrong way. But if you use them in the right way, that's why you could go right now, Lou, to your flowers over there and smell them, and you would just be like, and especially when you're out in nature and something so vibrant, and we want to be attracted to things that attract us. Like when we walk around in nature and we see a beautiful flower or something, it's saying, hey, come say hello to me. Come smell me. And just, you can feel the energy, especially the more you clean up yourself and clean up your body and your being, you can feel your environment so much more. And you'll be able to tell too, when you're in a negative environment, and your body will say, hey, we need to get away from here. We don't need to be here because I'm not comfortable here. I don't feel, comfortable with expressing my being, and so I encourage people to just start to really develop your awareness on how your nervous system and your spirit feels. Don't let the mind confuse you, because it will confuse you easily, but just focus on what you feel more than what you think. And then your heart and your feelings will direct you on what you should do and what you shouldn't do, because then you can get the mind out of the way and the ego out of the way, and it won't confuse you sometimes. Because sometimes we accept or we do things that are not necessarily good for us just because we're poorly influenced or we're around other people. Because, we want to be around people that inspire us to be better versions of ourselves, not people that are inspiring us to do things that are not good for us to do, And so, that's a very good way to look at the whole principle of just analyzing your life and what you have going on. Because we can start to make changes, because some people feel trapped. Some people say, well, Thad, I have to work at this job that I wake up every day and I don't want to go to that job. but you can do something about it. You just have to find a way to do something different. And a lot of times people are like, well, I feel trapped because I don't have any other choice, because I have to find a way to make money. And if I leave that job, I don't know what else I'm going to do. And it's because they're too busy coming up with excuses on reason why they need to stay, instead of saying, well, I'm going to keep looking for a solution on how I can get out of here. You got to keep focusing on the solution, not on focusing on the problem. And see, again, it goes back to, what are you putting your focus and your attention on? Because remember, the law of attraction, we attract what we think about. If you think about more positivity, you're going to attract more positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Think about more negativity, you're going to attract more negativity. And so that goes back to the thoughts and the emotions. Notice what you're thinking about, because you're going to attract more of it, because that goes back to the subconscious mind. What you think with the conscious mind, it programs the subconscious mind. And the only way to break those patterns is through practice. And you have to keep practicing how to think more positively, so you will attract more of that into your life. That's why I tell people, again, the love principle. The more we send out love to the world, we'll attract that back. But the more we give out hate and frustration, anger and all that, we're going to get more of that back. And remember, it always comes back more intense than we put it out. So that's why we always want to send out what we want to get back,
That's awesome. Tad, I have to go now,
Okay.
but it's been so lovely to talk to you. And I'm glad that we got to do this video and share this information with a lot of people. Hopefully this will be useful. We'll put some links and information, that books that you can read, and share this with your loved ones as well, or people that are going through difficult situations. And I appreciate anyone that has been watching until this point. This is a time that you took for yourself, which is good. That's out of self-love. So just to leave you guys with something, like some final words, it would be self-love and compassion, and look after yourself, your energy, and your surroundings. Is there anything else that you would like to say, just to give a final message to people?
Yes, I just want people to just be patient and loving with themselves through the transformational process. Just sometimes just slow down and just be calm and patient with the way things are unfolding. And don't get too hung up and upset if it don't always go the way you want it to, because just trust that the divine plan is happening the way you need it to, not always the way we want it to, but the way we need it to. And the more you can just let go and just trust, then it will work out that way. It's hard sometimes with our programming, but we just send love out to all of you guys, and we just hope that what we've said today could be inspiring to you and help motivate you to just start today with just small things that you can do to make yourself feel like you're having a better experience here on this planet, and we just send love out to all you guys, and we just hope you really can be inspired to just, stay strong in this world, and to just be patient with the way the world is right now. Because really, in many ways, this is a wonderful thing that's happening, because it's creating a lot of awareness and helping to a lot of people to wake up. So we need to focus on that. Focus on how this energy, this can help us to wake up and realize that we need to make some changes in this world, instead of just saying, oh, well, the world's going even more to crap. We don't want to focus on that. Focus on the beauty that can come out of this, which there is a lot of things that are coming out of it that's amazing. People are getting more back to their taking care of themselves more, instead of having to work so much and spend so much time socializing with other people in bars and events. They're coming back more to home, and to realizing they missed that and needed that. So there's a lot of amazing things coming out of it. We just need to focus on that. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Thank you, Tad, again. And thank you, everyone. Have a
Yes.
great day.
Thank you too. Thank you, Lou. And we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.